exactly. Good afternoon, welcome to another edition of Al Jazeera's Q&A live on YouTube with me, Hassan Patel. Each week we discuss the key issues that affect the news cycle. However, this week we've got something more closer to home, something which affects Al Jazeera and has been ongoing for the past few years. You may have heard that over the past couple of weeks, Al Jazeera's Mahmoud Hussein, who is an Al Jazeera journalist for Al Jazeera Arabic, has been detained in Egypt. He was arrested on the 20th of December and he has been behind bars under false pretense and also false accusations of spreading chaos to Egypt. Now, this is not the first time that an Al Jazeera journalist has been arrested. Over the years, we've had many of our colleagues who've been detained, arrested, sentenced, and also released and sentenced again. With me are two Al Jazeera journalists who've had the experience in Egypt. Firstly, Mohamed, who spent over 400 days in an Egyptian cell, and Abdullah Elshamy of Al Jazeera Arabic, who spent over 8 months or 9 months in an Egyptian cell. Both men, of course, are now here in Doha with us, but they've had the experience of being behind an Egyptian cell in Egypt on the grounds of spreading false news, which was, of course, false, but more importantly, on behalf of Al Jazeera Media Network, paying the price for honest and free and fair journalism. So, Bahar, first and foremost, can you just explain to me or to the audience out there, what is the situation with Mahmoud Hussein?
Actually, it's not only Mahmoud Hussein. We have some other colleagues who were sentenced in absentia, and also in 2015, one of our colleagues, who was Ibrahim Hilal, was sentenced in absentia for death penalty, which is shocking to send a journalist not committing any crime but being a professional journalist to death sentence. Add to that other professional journalists, Egyptian ones. You have Shawkan, you have other Egyptian, over 90 Egyptian journalists are languishing in solitary confinement and in Egyptian prisons just for being professional. And as you know, Shawkan now and others have been in jail for over 3 years. And as I said, just for being professional journalists.
Now, Mahmoud Hussein Abdullah was flying into Egypt on the 20th of December. He was questioned. They took away his passport and then they made him go back to the police station on the 22nd of December. Subsequently, they've extended his stay in detention for another 15 days as of last Thursday, and it seems this will continue. Do you know anything more about Mahmoud's situation from your own sources and contacts?
Well, I want to actually start by saying that Mahmoud Hussein is a professional journalist that I personally have worked with in 2012 and 2013 while being on assignment in Egypt. He is a very ethical man. He works to the point and he absolutely makes sure that he conducts his job as professional as, I might say, the book states. Right now, what I know is that he is in a solitary confinement in an undisclosed location. There have been people saying he's in Thura prison complex. Some others have been saying he's in the state security building in one of Cairo neighborhoods. But right now he has been not allowed to access any contact with his lawyer, with his place of work, and there is no any serious investigation in what he's been accused of. And for me, this is more of a deluded victory. The Egyptian regime is trying to make over for the sake of the supporters of the regime, because they haven't had any possible achievements since the last 3 years since the coup, and it's just that they suddenly found that is the media that's been hindering them, and no one else than Al Jazeera, who's been trying to do the story in a very professional and perfect conduct, and that's why they came back tagging Al Jazeera. And I think for Al Jazeera, for somebody like Mahmoud Hussein, who despite all the what's been happening in Egypt and what happened to other colleagues like Bahir, me and others, he went back to Egypt. So I don't think he had anything to hide or any issues, and that's why this whole thing it just looks ridiculous and totally made up.
Now you both know that Mahmoud was he gave, shall I say, a confession, and it's obvious it was under duress, and it's something that Al Jazeera Media Network itself has condemned, along with various organizations such as the Committee to Protect Journalists or Reporters Without Borders. We also know that his brothers were arrested, again on a false pretense to spread chaos, whatever that term chaos is. Why do you think the Egyptian authorities single out Al Jazeera journalists, like this case in Mahmoud's case? Of course, we've got the death sentences upon two of our colleagues, Ibrahim Hilal, and of course, I think it's Omar, forgot his name. Anyway, another Al Jazeera journalist has been put in the death sentence as well. And also you have 7 in absentia. So why is that the case? Why has there always been this attack against Al Jazeera journalists?
I just remember a word some other colleague told me when we were covering Egypt in 2013. We were in Rabaa and doing the coverage of Rabaa and other protests, because we were not only focusing on Rabaa, but we were focusing on everything else happening in Egypt. And she told me that, guys, you making us look bad because of your professional work. So we cover all aspects, and we cover political stuff, economic stuff, everything. So I think this is why the Egyptian regime goes after Al Jazeera. And it's not only Al Jazeera. There are other journalists who were arrested and stopped at the airport working for some media, who were like stopped at the airport on the way back. They were on holiday visiting their families, and then on the way back to Egypt, they were stopped at the airport, and they told them that you are not welcome in the country. So it's not only about Al Jazeera, it's more about the professional media.
And if I may add something here, is that Sisi said severally in interviews he's done that he prefers the media to be more of what used to be in the 60s. That is when it was only one single voice of the state media. Yes, he said it out that explicitly and without any shame. And even just like Bahir was saying, even those who initially supported his way to presidency, pro-Sisi media now are being lashed back against, even if you dare not speak the least thing. So it's because Al Jazeera is haven't been able to be contained or restrained.
But why is that? Why is it that Al Jazeera has been singled out? I mean, we have various other media organizations, mainstream media organizations, reporting out of Cairo. Yet why is it over the past 3 years we've seen constantly Al Jazeera journalists being picked on, Al Jazeera journalists being arrested, the bureaus being shut down? Why that the case? Because that's a question a lot of people ask.
Look at our coverage. Our coverage is really good and great and very professional. And as Abdullah was saying now, they were always keen to silence Al Jazeera. Remember what happened during the revolution, the Egyptian revolution, 2011. The channel that they wanted to silence was Al Jazeera, because we report everything. We have, I think every single journalist at Al Jazeera, they have passion for this profession. They just do it because they love it, not because of anything else. So they always want to shut those who have passion for Al Jazeera, those who have passion for freedom. For example, Abdel Fattah, this guy is an activist. He's brilliant. You may agree, or some people may agree or disagree with him, but this guy is a true freedom advocate. What happened with him? He was thrown in Egyptian jails for how long? He was thrown in jail under Mubarak. He was thrown in jail under the military council, under Morsi, under Sisi, and everybody. So this is the thing about the military regime in general. They go after those who have passion for freedom, for press freedom, for those who really want to make change in their job and their life.
And I think one main thing is that the government, throughout all these years, since, like Bahir mentioned, from the revolution 2011 up till now, the government has never been able to actually come up with a piece of information, put on Al Jazeera in any network, any evidence saying that Al Jazeera is, they always they accuse Mahmoud of, spreading false information. But we dare them as Al Jazeera to, they got almost most of the archive that was in Cairo bureau, which was at Mahmoud's house. You have everything there. If there's something you can come up with, put it on air. This is what was happening with Bahir, and you remember what was happening in the courts.
Just to clarify, Al Jazeera can't really clarify that content is Al Jazeera's, because we haven't been given access to
Evidence.
that information.
Remember what happened in our case.
But evidence could have been planted. Again, that's an accusation.
Horses.
Exactly.
Cars.
Exactly.
Nothing. And even the committee that came from the state TV. They said that there's no evidence against us
Any
in
kind
our
of
case
fabrication.
and any other journalist.
So you're talking about the court case that took against yourself, Mohamed,
in 2014 and
Fahmy,
2015. Show us. We even, I remember Mohamed Fahmy told that to the judge, and I told it to the judge too. Show us one single evidence that we fabricated news.
Exactly.
And the problem about this confession that he made, he was forced to do so. Can you imagine a person knowing that his two brothers were arrested, and
His
they
family
asked
is
him
under threat?
under threat, and whether you do this confession or we put him in jail. And this is also the scary part, putting a person in solitary confinement, knowing that his family is in, his brothers are in jail and his family are under threat. So that is really terrifying, and that will lead Mahmoud to some things like thinking that they might do some harm to his family, and that is the scary part about solitary confinement. I'm sure now Mahmoud is in a solitary confinement. I'm sure of that. Maybe a scorpion prison, as was did with both of us, and no food, no access to clean water, no access to anything, not allowed to exercise, 24/7 in a dark, disgusting cell full of insects and in this cold weather, sleeping on the floor. They only allow any person to go to scorpion prison wearing only one uniform, which is like a very awful material that you feel like freezing in this time of the year.
And this is, you're talking from experience, because both of you spent time behind bars. You're watching Al Jazeera's Q&A on YouTube with me, Hassan Patel, and in the hot seat today are Abdullah Elshamy of Al Jazeera and Bahar Mohamed, talking about press freedom and, of course, the arrest of Mahmoud Hussein of Al Jazeera, but also about the constant attack that Al Jazeera are under from Egypt. Now, we've got some questions on Twitter, and people are tweeting in at AJ English, and also on the message board on YouTube. Now, one question which has constantly come to my mind and has been told to me by many individuals is that, is it true that these arrests take place, this intimidation of Al Jazeera takes place because the Egyptian media or the Egyptian government labeled Al Jazeera as biased towards or against the regime, but also supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, and because of that, hence why Al Jazeera is constantly attacked?
Do you want to answer that?
No, I was going to say that throughout my 10 months of detention, I always challenged the prison officials, the judge in the court, that if you people have a single evidence saying that Al Jazeera in general, or Abdullah Elshamy or Bahir or anyone specific who's been arrested as Al Jazeera journalists came up with something being biased towards a certain organization or been pro this side or that side, come up with it. And for almost a year and a half of the detention, 10 months for me, they never made it, which makes it more of I would say it's a bully, it's a way of bullying Al Jazeera into submitting into what the regime wants to hear. I mean, we are not in Egypt. We don't have people on ground in Egypt. Offices have been shut down, and they still consider Al Jazeera as being an intimidatory media because they don't have the professionalism to actually challenge Al Jazeera. I mean, words go for words, but they don't see it that way, and that's how the regime thinks.
Now,
Can I add also one
thing?
Of
course.
I remember, this is YouTube, right?
Yes.
You can search anything on the Al Jazeera channel.
Yes.
You can search during when the Brotherhood were in power. I remember that I did a package about this stars Bassem Youssef, the comedy show, about making fun of Al Jazeera and Qatar. Okay.
Yes.
I remember I did a very professional, nice package about Tamarrud, which was against the Muslim Brotherhood during that time, and when they were asking, when they were collecting, this group of people were collecting signatures to sack Morsi. We managed to cover properly and professionally the 30th of June protest in Tahrir Square. How can we be biased? Bring us one evidence. Look at the archive. Check YouTube. Bring us one evidence. This is the problem of the Egyptian media's, Egyptian state medias keep shouting out, they are biased, they are the mouthpiece of the Brotherhood. Okay, show me one single evidence, because if they are asking us to prove that we are not, that's almost impossible. To prove the negative is impossible. Show us what you got.
Okay, fair point, can't argue with that, Bahar. I just want to take both of you back to the summer of 2013. There was a coup in Egypt. Mohamed Morsi was the president, and then was disposed, and Abdel Fattah Sisi came into power with his military.
In 2014, yes.
2014. No,
He
2013.
toppled in 2013 and then
Yes.
became a president in
Of course.
2014.
You were both covering the protests in Egypt at that time against the coup. As journalists, what did you experience? And then, of course, subsequently, Abdullah, yourself, you were picked up and taken away. What went through your mind at that time?
You mean at the time of the arrest?
Yes.
I mean, because most of my life I've been living outside of Egypt, and I have, I always heard stories about the way police treats people in stations, in prisons. At that moment, I thought if I had been shot dead, it would have been better for me than going through this experience, because from the first moment I was picked up till almost, the first week of this detention, there were these constant abuses, either physically or verbally, and of course, at the beginning, they didn't really realize they got Al Jazeera journalists.
But when you told them you were an Al Jazeera journalist, what happened then? Did it intensify, or was it just ignored?
In the beginning it intensified, because they thought this as a way of, because of the whole propaganda that was being made against Al Jazeera. They thought of this as a way of kind of
Al Jazeera. All the professional Western media, they are all spies.
Okay.
Yeah, that was of course the case. But I think in a subsequent time, when the campaign for the release of Al Jazeera journalists intensified, they kind of backed down a lot, because this pressure was they were not able to carry on this kind of abuse. But I think they mostly focused on the idea of breaking down journalists by putting them into, like Bahir was mentioning,
And were you behind bars at that time with other journalists?
Yes, in my own case, I was with photojournalist Mahmoud Abdul known as Shawkan. He's been
Who's still behind bars now?
Yes, still been behind bars now for over 1,000 days, and he's been tried in court as well for a charge that makes no sense. Nothing related to his work, and he's been considered as a criminal by the state, despite all the worldwide efforts to calling for his release. But I think it's I may be a bit I would say biased for journalism here, but I think the Egyptian regime doesn't like journalists who don't keep with their way of doing things, even if you were on their side, but tried to be a bit neutral. That wouldn't work.
Now, at this moment in time, it's the latter part of 2013. Abdullah is behind bars. There's a campaign going calling for his freedom, and you were working with Al Jazeera English, reporting from Egypt. Our bureau was shut down, and then on 29th of December, you receive a knock on your door. Explain what happened.
Oh, that was a shocking moment, not only for me but my family. The shocking thing was seeing a huge number of police officers coming over, and I even told the officer at that time, just give me a call, I will come over. I didn't do anything wrong.
But what was the grounds of them coming to your house? What did they say that you were arrested for?
They didn't say anything. They just stormed the house, shot my dog, but thank God the dog survived.
Gatsby.
Gatsby, yes. They stole everything in my house and my family's house. They start looking at everything. Thank God the kids didn't wake up. Can you imagine just lots of officers coming, storming, knowing nothing. What is going on? I kept asking, what is going on? What are you looking for? He said that we are looking for like any transmission device. I said, there is nothing. I don't have any transmission devices. I'm just a journalist, and let's talk. What do you want? And they kept ignoring me, cornering me in one place in my apartment. And I was even terrified. Like my wife is like, she was sleeping. She was in her pajamas, and one of them wanted to get inside to the bedroom, and I dragged them like, stop. What are you doing? You can't do that. And that was terrifying for me and my family, and also the shocking thing when I was leaving house, when they took me and blindfolded me and took me out, seeing my dog in like a blood bath, sleeping, looking at me as if he's saying I did my best, looking at my wife. This is before they blindfolded me. Looking at my wife, seeing her eyes trying to cry but trying to steadfast. And she's like not knowing what's going on, seeing my wife and my mom crying, and my father is worried, really worried. And that was like, for me, like, guys, hold on, just wait, what's wrong? And they said, are you working with Al Jazeera? I'm like, yes, I'm a freelance producer with Al Jazeera. I'm like, okay, come on, let's go.
So you end up in a cell with Mohamed Fahmy and Peter Greste.
Solitary confinement for some time.
Solitary confinement for some time, but then subsequently the three of you are up in the courthouse. And of course, you are going through the constant measures of going to court every few days, every few weeks.
And that was a relief, by the way, because they kept us. Can you imagine keeping 3 adults in a tuna can, as we were describing it, 24 hours?
Yes.
So getting out of that cell was kind of the relief, seeing what's going on, because we're not allowed to go out. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, of course. So just to kind of move this forward, the three of you and 5 of Al Jazeera colleagues were sentenced on the 24th of June for spreading false news. You received an extra 3 years on top of the 10 years for having...
For 7 and 3.
7 and 3 for having a bullet casket, a bullet in your possession. And it seemed at that time that the world had caved in. There was no hope for you, for yourself at that moment in time. Abdullah, you'd come out of prison by then.
Just a week before they got sentenced.
And the world knew about your plight mainly because of your own hunger strike that you went on, which lasted for I don't know how many days.
5 months.
For 5 months.
Yes.
At that time, both of you, did you kind of feel the sacrifices you both were making? You as a free man, of course, but you inside jail in the name of journalism.
I mean, to be honest, before I went to jail, I always thought of freedom of press as not really that. I mean, I didn't really feel it. That's why I didn't really care that much. But when I was in it and I saw that this was, I mean, it just came naturally that this is. I mean, of course, I wouldn't pray for anyone to be in any of our situations that we went through. But it's worth it, even if you had to give your life for the sake of freedom of press, because. This is what came at that mind at that time. And I remember the day when Bahir and his colleagues were being sentenced, I was in front of the courthouse. I came on that day. It was just a few days after my release, and I thought I could do anything. But then at that moment, we kind of lost hope, but we knew something better was coming, because in my case, the last 35 days of my detention were in a solitary confinement cell, in the Scorpion prison, and it looked like the world has come to an end as well, because I've been disconnected from everyone. Family was not coming, didn't know what was happening, even talking to other prisoners was not allowed. So, but I think it was that we believed in this as people who knew that the freedom of press, freedom of speech is something as much as important as water and air is for us as a mankind. I think that's what really made us go through this, and this actually changed our lives to know that to tell people that this is something that everyone should look out for, not just journalists, because when you silence people, when you don't give them the chance to know what's going on, it actually hurts. It for me, it's as much as any other major disease out there, because it takes out your right to know.
Now, both of you have mentioned eloquently that all of that despair was in the name of free media, and you had the Egyptian state trying to silence you, but also at the same time silence Al Jazeera. And you both know there was an international campaign of free AJ staff, which had media outlets ranging from the BBC and the Guardian to journalists in Ghana holding up placards, free AJ staff hashtag, calling for your release, and the pressure that was coming on the Egyptians. But Mahmoud is now experiencing what you've experienced. But with hindsight, do you feel that this may be more difficult, hence why we need to be more louder?
I can comment on that, on something I was told when I was in prison. One officer told me that you should be grateful because you have foreigners with you.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Chowkan.
So you're saying that because of your colleagues at that time,
because of my colleagues, Peter and Mohamed Fahmy.
Because at that time, just for your information, Al Jazeera were constantly worried.
Plus the international pressure, plus the journalists, the campaigns, which when I was inside, I never thought something like that would happen. I remember when I was talking with Peter and telling us about Twitter tweets like 600 million or something. I was like, no, maybe it's 6 million people exaggerating or something. But it really did work. But for the Egyptians, having some foreigners with me, that helped me, to be honest. If I was a single guy, I would be still in prison like Shawkan and other journalists. But when an officer come from the same country that you are and tell you that you should be grateful because you have foreigners, that really hurts. That need us to be more louder, that need us to shout hard. And that makes us and remind every single journalist all over the world that it's not about individuals, it's not about network. What happened to Bahir and what have happened to Abdullah, it may happen to any other journalist. So this is something that we need to put it as an international right or an international decree that journalists shouldn't be behind bars. Journalists, no matter what their citizenship, no matter what their skin color is, no matter whatever, they are professional journalists. They shouldn't be behind bars. That is something I really care for, because in Egypt I also thought that we have like a proper prosecution or a judicial system. No. The judge, the prosecutor, because I'm Egyptian, he threatened me.
So you're saying it's all political?
It's all
Exactly.
It's not a case. It's not a proper. I studied law. This is not a proper law.
Okay.
I thought one day when I was studying law that the prosecutor is the lawyer of the people. No, he's not a lawyer. Exactly.
And just exactly to what you were saying, we need to be totally more fierce and more louder for Mahmoud Hussein, because
for everybody.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because I think even looking at the conditions that when me and Bahir were in prison, things have changed now for the worse, unfortunately. But
for the worse?
Yes.
Well, how do you mean for the worse?
Because now, at that time, the regime wasn't, as brutal as it is now. It kind of cared for the pressure that came from outside, and it was trying to, get things in order, because the coup just happened. Sisi was trying to become a president, and that's why I think we should be more and more louder at this point, because the regime now doesn't really care about anything. We've seen, not just for journalists, we've seen, arbitrary detentions, people go disappeared for months and come up in court, been accused of things they never did. And that's why it's very important in this case that we put more pressure, because I think it's more about this, because like Bahir was mentioning now, it's not really about law or something that you can go face to face. It's something that is more about who pushes harder for their own side, and this is what Mahmoud needs right now.
Would you say, gentlemen, that Al Jazeera should continue doing what it's doing, at the same time campaign and call for the freedom of Mahmoud Hussein?
Plus, every single news network all over the world, they should work together, making sure that every single journalist, whether work for them or not, are free to report, free to move, and not behind bars.
But it is a bit scary when it comes to press freedom. Reporters Without Borders, just some information here. Egypt is ranked 158 out of 180 countries in terms of press freedom on their press freedom index. CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, say that 25 journalists are in jail behind bars in Egypt just because of their work. Or what they know of.
And I mean, there are a lot of freelancers and people who are not registered with any organizations are not even put in that list.
And Egypt's index itself is so bad when it comes to press freedom that it's only below China, Eritrea, and Iran. So what future does Egypt have for journalism if they will continue arresting? We will campaign for Mahmoud Hussein. Hopefully he will be freed. But then tomorrow will be someone else. I mean, what's the future?
Keep pressuring. Keep pressuring for every journalist. Keep reporting. Even journalists in Egypt who are not allowed to work or like they were kicked out of their from the networks, they're working on social media. Listen to them. Listen to the professional journalists. Don't listen to the state media. State media is something old-fashioned. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. One-side news doesn't work. So listen to people. Keep working hard as a professional journalist, and that's the only way.
But why do you think, I mean, both of you since your release, I remember Abdullah was campaigning for your release for the best part of a year, from 2014 to 2015, and then when you yourself came out, both of you have been to events around the world talking about press freedom. Why has there been this increase, it seems, on the press has that been the case constantly, or has it increased over the years?
You mean in Egypt?
Generally across the board.
Well, I think because we are living in a time where regimes mostly don't tolerate free information and kind of want to bring things back to, you know, the past century, 50s and 60s.
As you say, the 60s, yeah.
Yes, so I think that's why, because I think that's a general characteristic of, you know, dictatorships. They don't like to have different voices. They don't like any kind of dissent. So that's why the trend has increased, because the politics around the world has kind of got a bit extreme as well. So I think that's why, like Bahir was also saying, the idea of being behind any single journalist is not just for the sake of Egypt or Al Jazeera or this person or that. It's because it's a global phenomenon, just like you mentioned. So that's why if I think, you know, we thought at some point when Bahir and me and other colleagues were behind prison that was an opportunity for people, you know, different media organizations to come together and do some kind of combined force to stop this, or at least, you know, make it not as bad as it is now. But this is a chance again for us to say that media networks should always, you know.
One last thing I want to add is that I think journalists realize how strong they are.
How?
Look how much pressure when the BBC journalists went out, when Christian Omanpour carried the paper and saying that free Asia is stuff, and I think and everywhere in Somalia, in Pakistan, in Eritrea, in Kenya, in Afghanistan, journalists realize how strong they are.
Exactly.
How can they all stand together, shout out loud, and make everybody listen?
I think it's
and
never
make
happened
every
in the
single
history
leader
of press
and make
before.
every single leader talk about this case and talk about every other case.
Well, you had
that was amazing. That we are strong.
And I
we
believe
are
we can do that.
You had
once
Barack
again.
Obama, you had the British Foreign Secretary, the Australian Prime Minister, US senators.
Exactly. We can.
Even Sisi himself admitted that he wished
It was
this
a mistake,
problem
yes.
would go away. So it shows that
we
the
are strong.
relevance of
journalists
the
are
campaign.
very strong. Journalists and journalism and professional media is the core of democracy. Without professional without professional media, there will be no democracy. That's the key. We should keep shouting out loud for Mahmoud Hussein, for everybody. We are strong. We should not allow any journalist to be put behind bars.
Fair point. Moving on, we've got a few minutes left. It's very well having huge campaigns. It's very well journalists protecting press freedom. But how do you get through to a population that has no access to real news? A question from YouTube is it true that the Egyptian news that the Egyptians receive comes from the security services themselves? There's a clear instruction on what to report and what not to report on.
I'm afraid that's true. Most of the news channels, even the private ones, it's more of a power game between different security institutions in the country.
Yeah.
Every few of them have their own people who speak out, and you see some sort of things put on air that are never been, will never happen except if it was from a security source. Telephone calls been leaked, videos been leaked, and people speaking out in a way that you would never believe any normal person can do it. So that's the point. But I think why despite all these efforts and despite all this huge funding and capabilities that the media, the controlled media in Egypt is having, they don't really like even a small voice of taking a side against them. That's why. But I think just to answer that question, it's about going out to the internet, because the internet it would never be.
You mean social media?
Exactly.
Platforms like Facebook, Twitter.
The other thing is, it's not only about if it comes from security or not. When you listen to a news hour or you listen to anything and it's one-sided, that is wrong. Whether it's from security or not, look at both sides, and this is what we do here in Al Jazeera.
And
we
judge
bring
for
this
yourself.
side and the other side.
All sides, all angles.
All sides, all angles. But when you focus on one TV and state TV and private channels and all this stuff, and you find it all looking from the same perspective and the same angle, no, I'm not happy with that. I should look at the other angle. And also one more thing, at some time there were some studies that state-owned media is wrong. It should not happen in in our
In the
time now,
country. Yeah.
private channels should not be also owned by the businessmen, because businessmen, they have relation with politicians and the regimes. I think media should be owned by the people. It should
And
be
of course, I
independent.
mean, that in itself is a discussion, and we see also in the West
Mm.
of the way, for example, the US media covered the Trump election, and the one-sided, it seemed, questions that were coming out during the election campaign. Another day, another discussion. However, finally, before we wrap up, what can people do to protect press freedom, but more importantly, keep the campaign for Mahmoud Hussein alive?
I think it's about the noise, because I remember at the time I was released, the lawyer told me that the general prosecutor told him when he made the decision that I have had enough headache. He used that word, headache. I have never seen much headache because of somebody in my life. That's what the lawyer said, and that headache, he meant, of course, the campaign. So and he was referring to
the free
people.
agent stuff campaign.
Yeah, he was referring to people coming to his office and just submitting, complaints or demands
Petitions,
to release
letters.
this. Yes, and I think that's it. It's the headache, and I think any brutal regime, any dictatorship as in Egypt doesn't tolerate. I mean, when they see that journalism has backed down, quiet, they actually go hard against journalists. So for every single person, it's about speaking out. You have your own outlets as an ordinary person, which is your social media, talking to your neighbors, spreading the information. As much as the awareness has been raised, I think that's the first step into carrying on this. And for Mahmoud Hussein, I mean, and I ask every person, I mean, if we're talking only to Egyptians here at this point, is for you to judge. If you think, like Bahir was saying also, if you think Al Jazeera has had something, listen to Al Jazeera, listen to other people, and judge for yourself. Listen to those who make lies all the time and promised a lot of things and never happened. And look to, I mean, I'm not asking people to just believe in Al Jazeera, because it's your own conscience that you have to judge here. But you have to know that if you believe that Mahmoud Hussein is just another journalist, a spy, or whatever you can think of, and I don't care,
Judge
it
for
will
yourselves,
come to you.
look at the facts and reason
Exactly.
with the facts. Finally, Bahar, how important is this for press freedom? That Mahmoud Hussein, the campaign for Mahmoud Hussein, is always intensified until he's released?
Because it's more about democracy. It's more about international principles. It's not about individuals. If you believe that you don't care about press freedom, if you think it's not important, don't campaign for press freedom. Don't campaign for Mahmoud Hussein. It is an international and global principle that should be protected. If you care of it, fight for Mahmoud Hussein, fight for other journalists in your countries
Fight
or
for
any
your
other
freedom.
countries, and fight for even other journalists, not only Mahmoud Hussein, but other journalists who are being kidnapped and killed and tortured in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, in North Korea, everywhere.
And of course, if you want more information on what Bahar Mohamed or Abdullah Elshamy have spoken about, you can go on aljazeera.com/journalism is not a crime, or on Twitter, the hashtag journalism is not a crime, and you'll find more information about Mahmoud Hussein, but also the campaign for free and fair journalism. Abdullah Elshamy, Bahar Mohamed, thank you for your time. You both have been inspirations for many individuals in Al Jazeera, so no doubt that the beacon of press freedom is something you'll be carrying on for not days but years to come. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.